What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Texas Fishing Force. I'm Mike, and today we're talking about popping corks. Now, I know in the past I've talked about popping corks a little bit throughout all my videos, little tips and tricks here and there, but today we're covering it start to finish, everything you need to know about popping corks, a popping cork 101. All right, let's get started with a popping cork setup. Exactly how you want to set all of this stuff up, your rod, your reel, all of this, exactly what you want, what you need, how to set all of this up. All right, now, generally on pretty much every rod and reel I use between a 6'4" and 6'9" rod, and my rods are generally medium light. However, with the popping cork, I do make some changes to that. See, this is a 7-foot rod. This is a medium instead of a medium light. And the reason that I go with a longer rod and something that's a little bit stiffer, well, it's for a few reasons. One, it is going to help you cast. One of the biggest problems that people have with using a popping cork is casting. See, because all of your weight is here at the popping cork rather than here at the jig head. And so in the air, you'll find that this thing spins around and it can cause a lot of problems. It can cause backlashes. This can get tangled because all of your weight is distributed a little bit different. Now, running a longer rod like a 7-foot, something that's a little bit stiffer like a medium, well, that just helps on your castability, but it also helps on your hook sets and being able to pop that cork correctly. So for me, I go with a little bit longer rod. I go with a medium instead of a medium light, and that for me is the perfect setup. All right, now a lot of people do use spinning rods and spinning reels instead of a bait caster because it really does help with minimizing those backlashes. It's a lot easier for most people to cast a popping cork with a spinning reel rather than a bait caster. But I personally like bait casters for everything. I like the precision. I like, really being able to control my cast a little bit better, and I'm just kind of used to it. So I really like this. Now, this is a Shimano Curado DC. Now, on a popping cork setup, I do use 40-pound braid. All of my other setups, I generally use like 30, and that is your basic rod and reel setup. All right, let's talk about the actual popping cork and soft plastic setup. This, like I said, I use braid on all of my rods and reels, and I tie directly onto the top of the popping cork with a uni knot. Now, this is a fluorocarbon leader. I use fluorocarbon for all of my leaders. Now, the distance of this really depends where you're fishing. If you are fishing in deeper water and you want to spin this a little bit lower, then you're going to want to go a little bit longer. Sometimes I even go a little bit shorter on these. It just kind of depends what I'm fishing. If I'm fishing shallow water over oyster, then I'm going to, keep this at like 12 inches or 18, which is where this is now. But the length of the leader really just depends on where you're fishing, what you're fishing for, what you're looking for. And then lastly is the jig head. This is a knotty hooker jig head. And generally on this, I go a little bit heavier on the jig head just because when you have this in the water and when this lands, you want this to be sitting below the popping cork. You don't want it to be like up here closer to the surface. So that's one reason I use a little bit heavier. But the second reason is that when I pop this, I want that heavy weight to have a lot more motion, and so it just gives you a lot more action when you pop it if you have a heavier jig head. All right, let's talk about when you want to use a popping cork, when you don't want to use a popping cork. What is a popping cork for? Well, first, which is probably the most obvious, anytime you want to suspend the bait in the water where you don't want this at the bottom, you don't want your lure at the top, you just want to suspend it somewhere in the middle. That's really what a popping cork was made for. Now, this is my go-to setup if I'm fishing over oyster because I can suspend this just above the oyster. which is what I'm doing now. I've got oyster all around me, and so popping cork it is. So this really helps to keep me from getting caught up on all of that. You know, another option is just go with a weedless, but I like the ability to pop this right over the top of oyster and all of that shell without really having to worry too much about getting caught up and, you know, losing jig heads all day. So now another time that I really like to use a popping cork is when you have a lot of water movement, when you have water that is making noise. Well, one of the biggest benefits to a popping cork is that it makes noise, so it helps attract fish. When you pop it correctly, it sounds like bait fish splashing or fish running, and so this really helps attract fish when you have all of that noise going on in the water, and it just kind of helps pinpoint those fish. Another time that I like to use a popping cork is when there are tons and tons of bait, where you see bait just kind of jumping everywhere. Well, this just, again, with that noise, it helps bring fish closer to that. They're going to hear it, they're going to come closer, and it really just gives you that extra benefit of attracting more fish. So if I see a ton of bait and I'm missing fish, or if I'm seeing, you know, redfish running around that I can't hook up on them, chances are they're chasing all of that other bait. So this gives you the advantage to get their attention. All right, now another great time to use a popping cork is when you want to really run across a shoreline. You have a lot of current moving. You can toss this into the current and really let the current just kind of drag that down the shoreline if you want to stay really close. Rather than making multiple casts all the way down the shoreline, a popping cork can run all the way down as long as the current is moving in the right direction, right? And you can be popping that the entire way down the shoreline, not a problem at all. So I really like to use that to eliminate an entire shoreline all at once. Make sure, you know, it really helps you make sure that there's no fish there at all, and so you can cover just a lot more ground with a popping cork than you can with just a lure by itself. All right, let's talk about casting. Now, on most rods and reels, I am kind of pinpointing exactly where I want to cast, and like I'll do, you know, side whip casts towards that area, and you can kind of do that all day. With a popping cork, I generally toss this way higher into the air, and I let the weight of the cork pull the line, and the weight of the cork and gravity pull this back down. I don't want to be kind of whipping this out, because you're going to get backlashes. It's going to happen. But anyway, that's pretty much it. So I'm casting a little bit higher, and I'm not really like whipping that out there. I want this, you know, I want the gravity and I want the natural weight of that popping cork to control the cast. So I'm generally doing a much softer cast when I'm casting a popping cork, and that helps a lot. Now, on a bait caster, you definitely want to be thumbing that the whole way, and the moment that popping cork hits the water, you want to be stopping that. So, all right, one more time. I do have my thumb on there. We are going to cast really high into the air and then let it drop, and thumb it at the moment that hits the water, and your cast is much more successful that way. Lastly, let's talk about how to pop this cork, which is, I guess, the most important part, right? Now, when you're using a popping cork, and realistically any artificial bait, you want tension on that line. You don't want all of this slack in the line, because when you do that and then you go to set it, well, it doesn't even do anything. So you want tension, so that any kind of movement, you're going to be able to feel, but two, the moment that popping cork goes down, you have that tension to set that hook really hard. Now, when it comes to the actual popping thing, one of the biggest mistakes that I see other people make is that they're pulling this towards themselves. Now, inevitably, no matter what, because your popping cork is way out there and not right here, anytime you pop this, it's going to come a little bit closer to you, but you don't want to be pulling it towards you. What you want to do instead is you want to be lifting the rod up, right? So you want to be popping that up because we want that popping cork that is kind of sitting there to be popping up and down in the water and moving that jig head around, right? So if we're constantly pulling straight towards ourselves, well, then that jig head is only going in one direction. It might kind of sink back down, but we want that popping action for the cork to be coming out of the water, right? So rather than pulling towards me, I'm pulling up. Now, you'll know that you're doing it right because you can hear that kind of click sound, but it also sounds just like a bait fish that splashes, or some of those bait fish that jump out of the water and they're running. You can absolutely tell the difference between doing it so wrong and right. It makes that clicking noise, and when you get it, you'll understand. It really does make a difference. All right, guys, well, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope this video helps answer a few of your questions about popping corks, or how to use them, how to set them up, answer at least a few of those questions. And like always, if you have any more questions, don't hesitate. You can send me an email at texasfishingforce@gmail.com. You can also message me or leave a comment on YouTube at Texas Fishing Force. Thank you guys so much for watching, and like always, if you haven't already, please subscribe, leave me a comment, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.